Hi guys, welcome to Webcast 1 Live. The show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. And guys, I got to tell you, I'm really excited today. We have a really interesting show. Today our guest is Andy Stoll. You can find Andy on the web at, make sure I'm doing this right, Max, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you can find him at www.andystoll.net. I'll tell you what, I saw Andy 10 days ago. He blew my paradigms away about about a lot of things that I think about living, about life. And I'll tell you what, I'm really excited because I think this show is going to rock your paradigms a little bit. Andy has done something that most of us talk about but never do. Andy has spent the last 4 years traveling all over the world, experiencing the world. And I saw him do a presentation the other day at a techie forum, and he was the least techie presenter, but he was the most powerful and most compelling speaker of the day. Guys, the show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. Stick around. I think this is going to be one of the most interesting shows that we have done here at Your Money, Your Future. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios. Listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast 1 Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
The Kincaids live here. Across the street, the Padillas. Ben and his family live here too. Ben's a RE/MAX agent, and he's a big part of this community. There are lots of reasons why RE/MAX agents average more sales than other agents. Experience, certainly. But maybe it's also because they care about the markets they serve and the neighbors who rely on them. Nobody sells more real estate than RE/MAX.
Hey guys, welcome back. The show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. We're broadcasting to you live from webcast1live.com. And I'll tell you what, if this is your first time joining us, we're glad you're here. This show is really designed to kind of be different. The show's about helping you navigate the waters towards whatever financial dream, financial goal it is that you have. And I'm kind of excited about this show today because there are, a lot of different reasons. First of all, we've got a really interesting and compelling guest. His name is Andy Stoll. And I saw Andy, must have been 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, do a presentation. And he was just absolutely spectacular. His message was spot on. It was sharp. And it's a message that we need to hear. And I'm lucky enough to have Andy with us. He's on the line with us. We actually are doing a Skype. So really excited to have Andy. Andy, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know if you can see me, but
yeah, there you are. Gotcha. All right, right on. Okay, so and I really don't know how to do a really good presentation for Andy because, if or an introduction. If we were to do an introduction, the introduction could be very, very long. But I'll tell you what, the presentation that he did was, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, the presentation was why you need to travel overseas and how. Am I right on that?
Yeah, it's essentially it's how to travel and why, which is an important question, to take a long-term trip around the world.
Okay.
Whether that long-term is a month or 4 years, but that was the general idea, and just telling a little bit about my story and trying to encourage people to pursue that if that's something they want.
Well, you know what, Andy, I think that's the best thing that we can do. If I try to do an introduction, I'm never going to do you justice. I was on an hour and a half run with a couple buddies of mine, and I tried telling them your story, and I just came across as like this really excited goofball that had heard somebody speak but couldn't do justice to your story. And I think you do a great job of talking in pictures. So I'm simply here to facilitate the conversation. What I'd really love to do is have you tell us the story. What the heck happened? How did you wind up coming up with this idea that you want to travel, and what it evolved into?
Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you today and share my story a bit. And I want to set my story up, though, initially with kind of how I set it up at the event at the bar camp there that we talked that we met. And the story begins with a pretty simple question in that. And that question is, if you could do anything regardless of money or time, what would you do with your life? So, for example, if tomorrow you didn't have to go to work, and you didn't have to take care of your kids, or you didn't have to do something that you have to do now, if you could do anything you wanted, if you could walk out the front door of your house and do whatever you wanted, what would you do? And that was sort of the question I started that off with. And I think it's a good question, and I'll ask it, rhetorically, unless you want to answer it, because it's only you and I chatting. But just to
there you go.
Take a second, think about what it is if you had, all the time and all the time and money, and you didn't have these other things. What would you do? Some people might say, I'd go to work. So if that's the case, that's perfectly a great answer. My guess is that if you asked an average group of Americans what was their biggest dream, a good percentage of them, definitely more than half, I would even go so far as to guess 70% would say something related to travel. Now, it might be different for everyone. It might be, I'd go to the Mediterranean and I'd sit on a beach, or I'd ride a motorcycle across Argentina, or I'd go to China and climb the Great Wall, or I'd go sit on a beach in Tanzania. I mean, I don't know what it is, but my guess is that something, if you were looking for a tangible thing to do right now, go out the door and do it, you'd say something related to travel.
Sure.
Well, my story is that it began with a question. Looking back when I was graduated from college, I was 23 years old. It's a great opportunity and a great time in life because you can do anything in the world, and it's really scary because you can also do anything in the world. So I began to look around and kind of look at my options, and there were one big thing, an experience that I was lacking was going overseas. I was 23 years old. I was an American, at a college degree from an American university. I had all the world at my fingertips, and for some reason I had never left the country, and that's actually pretty typical in the American world. But I realized that was a shortcoming that I had. So I decided I would want to do something overseas. So I started to look around, and when you're young, out of college, and you have a degree, you can, go to Japan and teach English. You can go to Africa and volunteer, in a clinic. You can backpack across Europe. And I'm a bit of a greedy person. That might be one of my vices. So I decided I was going to do them all. So I talked to a friend of mine who had graduated a couple of years earlier, had done a 3-month trip around the world. I called him up. I said, how did you do that? His name's Seth. I said, how did you do that? What's the story there? And he told me, and I said, it's really that easy? And he said, yes. And I said, is it really that cheap? And he said, yes. And so I said, well, I kind of want to do that. And so I decided right then there, I was 23 years old. I didn't have a lot of money. I came against all those things that everyone probably comes against when they think they're going to travel, do something like that. And but I
need to have $1 million bucks, right?
And I didn't have any baggage, anything holding me down. I wasn't. I basically wanted to go after it, and so I spent 3 years. I worked in a pretty normal job. I saved up my money, and in 2006, when I thought I had, what was enough money, I got a backpack, a Virgin passport, and a one-way ticket to China, and I left. And the goal was to go around the world for a year. I went to Hong Kong first, and was very fortunate in that time period at the beginning of my trip to meet up with the Rotary. I got some money through the Rotary to have a great program called the Ambassadorial Scholars Program. I ended up going over, getting some money from them. That made my 2-year trip into a 1-year trip into a 2-year trip, and then ended up doing some, I guess the story, if you want to relate it back to money, is at the end of 2008, I ended 2 years around the world, a year longer than I thought, and I decided it was time to go home. I was out of money. It was 2 years. It was a great adventure, and I was in Indonesia. I decided to end my trip in Bali. I thought that was a pretty good place. And I looked at the news when I got there, and they were telling me stories about America that weren't that appealing. There was a recession going on, apparently, August 2008.
Yeah, we were in the midst
of
a global.
Believe the news,
yeah, we were in the midst of a global meltdown. Yeah. I vaguely remember it.
Yeah. So, if you remember, if you believe the news in Indonesia, and here's a lesson about the news, and this was probably CNN. This is in Bali. You would believe that Americans were eating toilet paper and water over here because they were running these stories about. All these, like, it seemed like everyone was living in their SUV in the park, and everyone was having these gold parties, selling their gold to make money to survive. And I realized that seemed like a really bad time to come home and try to get a job. And my thought there was the best way not to lose a job in a recession is not to have one. So my goal was to try to outlast the recession. Did a little research. It turns out if you're under 31 and you're American, you can go to Australia. It's a pretty easy thing to do in terms of getting work. So I went down there. I moved to a town called Baladonia, Western Australia. I worked in this town. Baladonia, Western Australia has a population of 10 people. I was number 10, and I worked as the morning truck driver and a morning cook and the nighttime bartender for truck drivers, overland truck drivers in Australia, for months. And I saved up enough money there, and I had an amazing experience to extend my travel out for another year and a half. And so basically the whole experience altogether, I spent 4 years traveling around the world. I set up to go 1 year, and I ended up going to 4 countries on 5 different continents. And certainly there was tourism going on. I certainly went to see the Taj Mahal and climb the Great Wall of China and go do that, go see Uluru in Australia. But what it really was for me was to do a couple things. One was to understand how people live in the world. I work as a social entrepreneur and filmmaker, so to understand how the world works. I think I knew here, but I didn't know down here. So part of it was to go out and have those experiences. And so, some of those things. I lived in a Buddhist temple in Korea. I took university courses in China. I ended up acting. I worked on a couple Bollywood films. I ended up acting. I played an 18th century British soldier in a Bollywood film. The biggest
and that's
film,
really funny when you see you in person better, because you don't look like an 18th British citizen.
Yeah, that's a funny story. When I finish the story, we can talk about that one, because maybe I'm famous in India. If anyone's listening from India, they should let me know. Maybe I'm famous, because I can't imagine there's a lot of 18th century British soldiers moving in India that look like me. I ended up living
probably
in
not very many. No.
Zambia. So I ended up living in a mud in Zambia, in a little tiny village, learning how to farm corn. I lived on a 450,000 acre cattle ranch in Australia. I spent some time in Fiji doing some, worked on a team doing cataract surgeries for really poor villagers in remote parts of Fiji. I didn't do the surgery, but I helped with the program. I cooked apple pie on Armenian national television, which is something I didn't set out to do, but turned out to be a once in a lifetime experience. But the idea was to go out and have those type of experiences, to try to see how the world worked. And also underneath it was, it was what I wanted to do with my life, and it was experiences I wanted to have, and it ultimately was, probably the best decision I ever made, and will shape me for as long as I want. And it's an interesting question to come back, and I don't mean this in any bragging sort of way, but to come back to the U.S. I just got back a couple months ago, to really think about your life and say, listen, I just achieved my biggest dream, so what's next? And to be young, I mean, I'm in my early 30s. To be young and to be able to look at life, I know that whatever I do, especially work-wise, I don't think I'm going to feel trapped. That I missed out on that thing that I really wanted to do. But the point of the whole story is simply this: that I'm not. I would like to point this out. My dad's a social worker. My mom's a nurse. My family's not particularly wealthy. I mean, they're definitely middle class. They're from Omaha. Not anywhere flashy on the map. I have a public school education. I went to public school my whole life. I used to drive a 17-year-old car. I'm not anybody special. I'm just a normal guy who decided had this dream to go see the world, and and decided that I just wasn't going to let anything get in the way. There's lots of questions about reasons why or how I did it, and I guess I'll let you ask those. But it really comes down to the simple point that, everyone tries to think of the reason they can't pursue their biggest dream. They come with that one reason that's like, oh, I can't do that because of X, Y, Z. And I think in telling my story, everyone tries to find that one point, that one thing I'm going to say where I go, oh, yeah, my uncle's really rich and he gave me money, or I speak 7 languages, or whatever it is. But I think most people will find, especially if you're middle class, if you're listening to a webcast on the internet at home, you are probably of the financial and economic and social place in the world that if you really wanted to travel around the world, if that was your dream, or if you wanted to go for a week or a year or 4 years, whatever, that you can make it happen. But it's a matter of really committing to it and making that decision, and that there are no secrets, there are no silver bullets. It can be done if you.
And what I think, one of the things that I thought you did great that was in the bar camp presentation was that you shared. I graduated from school, I worked for a year, and then I launched. And, I think the idea that you've got to be ultra wealthy, because at one point, didn't you say that, and I'm gonna leave, we're gonna walk into the break with this question, we'll answer and I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it, and then we'll talk about this on the other side. But one of the things, and you and I have talked about this since then, it's really interesting because you threw some numbers out, $17,000, $18,000, $19,000, $20,000 a year to live. And, I think a lot of people have this notion that I've got to have $1 million, or I've got to have $2 million, I've got to have X amount of money in the bank. And I think the most elementary thing that you talked about is not having debt and not going to the 5-star Hilton in India. You lived the experience of India. And what I would like you to do on the other side of the break is, and it's not, I'm not just narrowing that down to India, it's across your global walk. But I'd really like you to talk about that a little bit on the other side of the break. Is that a fair area to dive into?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We'll lead into the break with this point that when I left the U.S. on this trip, 2006, I owed the federal government $24,000 in student loans. So first of all, I thought it was a great time to leave the country because I owed that money, but 2, that I didn't let debt stop me.
All right, guys, the show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. The guest that we have today is Andy Stoll. And Andy, I got to admit, I have been excited all weekend for this interview. I don't get super excited to interview people, but I have been absolutely excited. I've been talking to a bunch of people about this show, this particular episode, and I'm thrilled you're here. And on the other side of the break, guys, we're going to talk with Andy Stoll, and you can find Andy on the web at www.andystoll.net. But we're going to talk a little bit about how he did this and some of the experiences he had. Guys, the show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. We'll talk to you in a couple minutes.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios. Listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast 1 Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders. Building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
The Kincaids live here. Across the street, the Padillas. Ben and his family live here too. Ben's a RE/MAX agent, and he's a big part of this community. There are lots of reasons why RE/MAX agents average more sales than other agents. Experience, certainly. But maybe it's also because they care about the markets they serve and the neighbors who rely on them. Nobody sells more real estate than RE/MAX.
Hi guys, welcome back. The show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. And we've got great guests today. A guy by the name of Andy Stolen. Andy has a compelling story, an interesting message. And if you didn't catch the first part of this, Andy has spent the last 4 years traveling around the globe, experiencing the culture of what Andy's at over 40 different countries. Am I right on that?
That's right. 40 different countries over the course of almost exactly 4 years.
And I'll tell you, the reason he's on this show, Your Money, Your Future, is, and Andy and I've had some interesting conversations since I saw him do his presentation a couple of weeks ago. But I think the idea that so many people have about money, about retirement, about living is so out of skew, and so many people are pursuing to have this big chunk of cash, and they don't live life. They don't take time to live life, and or they retire, and with this big wad of cash, and don't go out and use it for what it's worth, and that's to go and experience and taste life. And that's why I've got Andy on the show. I think his story is compelling. And while I'm not nearly as traveled as Andy, I was lucky enough and blessed enough as a kid. I got to spend some time and live in Brazil and get to experience different cultures, and I'm passionate about that. There's at the end of the day, I don't care how long your day is. If it's a 30-year life, a 60-year life, a 70-year life, whatever that life is, you're not going to take the money with you. What you are going to have is experiences. You're going to have insight, and you're going to have lived. And that's why I got Andy here. He's an expert at telling the story. So Andy, back to the question that we asked before the break, and I have absolutely lost the question that I asked you. So go ahead. I'm done with my portion of the filibuster. The floor is yours again. Well,
I think the number one question that people ask when they don't know me and they say you've been traveling around the world for 4 years, the first question is almost always, well, how much did that cost, or what did you spend? And I don't know what people are thinking in their mind. I actually be very curious what people are thinking in their mind who are new to the idea of traveling around the world, how much it might cost. The actual number, and this isn't hard and fast because it depends on who you are, where you travel, how you travel, a lot of other factors. But I would say in my own style, which was 80% of the developing world, and is for as cheap as possible, basically, was that I spent about $20,000 a year. If you average it out over 4 years, and it varies a little bit. It's easier to estimate, I think, if you just say it was about $25 a day. Now, people thinking $25 a day, I can't even eat dinner, for $25 a day. If you put it in the context of the developing world, and you realize that $25 in the U.S. will barely get you dinner for two at Applebee's, but in Thailand or in China or in India or in Africa or in Argentina, that could be, that will get you 3 very nice meals, an air-conditioned hotel room, private room. It will get you taxi rides. It will get you admission to things. So the money, obviously, if you travel, people know this. But really, the point of all it isn't the money, and that's actually the key there. There's a travel writer named Rolf Potts, Rolfpotts is his name, and he writes a book called Vagabonding, which I would recommend to anyone. And it's
say the name of it. You said it's Vagabonding.
It's called Vagabonding, like vagabond with an ing at the end.
Okay.
And one of the things the sort of stories that he tells in the introduction, it's the book's about not just how but why to travel, and I think that's actually a bigger question, because the how thing I think anyone could figure out. If I can figure out, anyone can figure it out. But what he does is he tells a story about Wall Street, the movie Wall Street, and the Michael Douglas, Charlie Sheen one, the original one, and there's a scene in there where Charlie Sheen says something to the effect of he's talking to his girlfriend, and he remembers he's a stockbroker, and he says, once I make $1 million, I'm gonna quit this gig, that being the stock market. I'm gonna take a motorcycle across China. And the point and the irony and sort of the backwards thinking that I think a lot of people prescribe to, particularly in the United States, is that you need $1 million to ride a motorbike across China. But if you were in China or Brazil or anywhere else, you'd figure out that for probably a tenth of what you're living for right now, you could ride a motorcycle across China for 3 months, or Argentina or whatever. And so that the priorities are sort of backwards, the belief that you need the $1 million. So my story is, first of all, that I left with $25,000 worth of debt I owed in student loans to the government. And then I know all the moms out there rolling their eyes at this point because they think I skirted that. But in fact, you know what? I didn't. I've been paying it the entire time I was traveling. I'm still paying. I'll be paying it for 10 more years. But first of all, and I'm sure you've talked lots about debt on this show. Obviously, debt is good and bad, and we can have a whole show about that. But to me, an educational investment was really important, and it was the only way I was going to be able to pay because my family didn't have the money. So I worked, and I took on debt. But the idea that I kept paying it and just built it into the budget seems like a revolution to some people. I don't know why that seems like a revolution. I think I probably paid, truthfully, $190 some or $200 some per month that I just built into the budget. So I knew I wanted to go I had so much money, so that would last so many months, and every month I just clocked down that I was going to have a deduction from my bank account for my student loans. So I didn't defer them. I didn't not pay them. It was all part of the plan. So that's the beginning of the conversation about money and the story. But the story I kind of want to tell is more about this story and a realization about the relationship between money and happiness. And the story, again, I had a lot of experiences around the world, and one place I ended up was on this train in Zambia that I was traveling behind. I was traveling from Tanzania to Zimbabwe, and Zambia, the country, happened to be in between. I didn't know anything about it. I was going to travel through it for a day. I was trying to get to Zimbabwe because I thought it was more interesting of a country. And I hit the border, and it ended up costing $100 to get across the border rather than what I thought was going to be $30. And I was sort of a bit angry because I had to pay $100 US to get across the border, and I was going to be spend a day basically in the country. That's really expensive in my mind. And so what I was complaining out loud. I was like, I just paid $100. I really need to find something to do in Zambia for a little bit. And excuse me just a second. Sorry, just had some interference. And so basically what I ended up doing is I ended up going across the country, or getting to Zambia, and I was complaining out on this bus about the money I spent, and I said, I need to find something to do in Zambia. And a guy says to me, who I've been talking to, he goes, why don't you come to my farm up to my village and learn how to farm maize? And I think I thought he was joking, so I said, okay. And I think he thought I was joking, so he said, okay. And so I ended up hitchhiking across the country up to his place and living in his village, little mud hut village, northern part of Zambia. Now, here's the story. In that village, they lived on less than $1 a day. I mean, basically nothing in our comparison. And you sit around most of the day. I mean, we farmed in the morning. We watched kids play and run around and do all sorts of things and play games. And I watched not how much prosperity they had, but how much happiness they had. And I'll tell you, those are some of the happiest kids I've ever seen in the world. Now, fast forward about 7 months later, I ended up in Australia. I was working in a small town called Baladonia, Western Australia, population 10. It was essentially a truck stop. There are people in Australia they call the gray nomads. The gray nomads are people who, when they sell everything, they buy a RV and they drive around the country their whole life, the rest of their life, and they just stay wherever, they see whatever they want, and they stay as long as they want, and they move on, and they're all retired, and they live out of this RV in this amazing country, Australia. My job at that truck stop one day was making some coffee for people. So I was making some cappuccinos like a Starbucks guy. And this lady came up to me. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, and she had this $500,000, $1 million RV out, parked out front that I could see. And she comes in. She says, I want a cappuccino. So I make her a cappuccino, and for whatever reason, it wasn't right for her. And she literally dumped it on the floor and had a screaming hissy fit at me that I had overheated the milk, or I can't even remember what it was, and then berated me for about 2 minutes. And then her husband came in and said, honey, calm down, and she berated him. And what struck me in that moment was this woman had the life that everyone in the world probably wants. She was free in an RV to drive around this beautiful country and do whatever she wanted, to buy her lattes and her cappuccinos, to go anywhere she wanted. She was free as a bird, but she was miserable. And she decided to take that miserableness out on me, on her husband, and out on unfortunately, the coffee, which ended up on the floor. And what I wanted to say to her at that moment, didn't, but what I wanted to say was, listen, lady, 6 months ago, I was living in a mud hut in Zambia, in a village, with these kids who literally have nothing. They sleep on the floor. They don't have shoes. They live on $1 a day. All what they eat, their meal is called shima. which is essentially boiled flour. Anyway, they have nothing by your comparisons, nothing compared to your $500,000 RV, nothing compared to your, $4.50 cappuccino. But you know what? Those kids and those people were so much happier than her. And somewhere in there, she lost her priorities. She lost her perspective. And that was one of the first times we began to really understand there is quite a disconnect between happiness and money, the reality of people around the world.
And it's interesting, and doing what I do, Andy. I don't think any of us, truthfully, really believe that money buys happiness. Right. I think that I think we operate under this notion that it can buy us stuff, but at the end of it, does it really buy you happiness? And as a certified financial planner, a guy with a master's degree in financial planning, that's not the key piece for me. The key piece for me is, what can this money do? What can you experience? How can you live? And it's fascinating when you look at the footprint of what you've done in 4 years. And I'm not advocating that everybody ought to go out and travel, because everybody's passions, everybody's experiences, or what they're excited about is different. But I think that your experience will give you the opportunity to go and be significant. And I don't mean that you're going to invent, penicillin, or you're going to discover penicillin and antibiotics and that kind of stuff. But I think one of the things that was really interesting that you said, talking about the overseas experience, and as you're traveling across the world, there are many countries where an overseas experience is a requisite to get a good job. And
absolutely,
I think it's really interesting that as a country that's founded on a melting pot, we have lost the connectivity to the world. We can Twitter, we can Facebook, but we don't have that connection. And I would love for you to share a little bit about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, people always ask you what I learned, and there's thousands of things we could talk for hours. But one of the biggest surprises, possibly the biggest surprise of the whole experience, to me, being an American who had never left the country before this, I've really only left the country once. I just got to 40 countries in that trip. But the surprising thing was that Americans don't travel like the rest of the world. And by what I mean by that is particularly to the developing world, that we limit our travels. So the fact that's crazy to think about to me, having just spent 4 years traveling, is that most Americans will never take a vacation more than longer than 14 days in their entire life. So that means 14 days we could do whatever you want. I mean, I'm not even saying traveling. I'm just saying taking 14 days off work. Most people will never spend longer than 2 weeks doing it. And one of the beauties of traveling that I got from it was the ability to experience true and absolute freedom. And that's probably if you were to boil it down, what's the best experiences are the ones where you literally can do whatever you want. And that goes back to that question that I asked at the beginning. If you could do anything regardless of money or time or responsibilities, what would you do? It's ultimately a question is, if you were free, what would you do? And the irony is that we live in the country of the land of the free sort of experience. But what I guess, and to talk to that point a little bit more, is this idea that Americans don't travel like the rest of the world. And people may beg to differ, and I'm willing to get in this debate with people because I think it's an interesting perspective. So what I did, even if let's just say I went for a year, it's still considered slightly weird, slightly odd. And if you went to another country like the UK, England, if you went to Australia, if you went to New Zealand, if you went to Canada, if you went to Spain, Germany, Holland, even Sweden or whatever, you would find that a lot of those countries have a thing, what they call a gap year in England or in Europe, which is a year between, say, college and the real world, quote unquote, the real world, or high school and college, where you take a year and you go out into the world and you do something. Maybe you volunteer, maybe you work, maybe you just travel, maybe you just sit on a beach for a year. But you get a little perspective about life outside of your country. The New Zealanders call it an OE, or an overseas experience. So if you're 30 years old and you live in New Zealand and you have not been on an OE, the idea in New Zealand is that you work for a couple of years and then you go on your OE for a couple of years and you come back. So if you're 31, 32 in New Zealand, you apply for a job and you don't have an OE on your resume, people say, do you understand how the world works outside of New Zealand? And New Zealand's a pretty isolated country. So it's built into other cultures. I mean, you talk to the Germans; they're on vacation half the time, traveling around the world, and the Dutch as well. Even the Canadians, which we're probably most similar to culturally. The Australians will do it, and so that was a really big surprise to me. I mean, even the Japanese, I think, travel more than we do, and in the big scheme of things. So what that brings up, and we talked about this before, and I think it's sort of my theory of the 5 reasons why Americans should be the most traveled, and then 5 reasons why we're not.
Hey Andy, can I interrupt you? I know we've got to hop to a break. Can we do that 5 and 5 list on the other side of the break? Because that is a very powerful portion of the message. So guys, the show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. We've got Andy Stoll on the show with us, and Andy is a social entrepreneur that has spent the last 4 years traveling the world, and he's been talking to us about not only how you should travel, but I think more importantly, why you should get out and experience the world. Guys, we'll talk to you in a couple minutes. The show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future. We appreciate you.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios. Listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast One Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
The Kincaids live here. Across the street, the Padillas. Ben and his family live here too. Ben's a RE/MAX agent, and he's a big part of this community. There are lots of reasons why RE/MAX agents average more sales than other agents. Experience, certainly. But maybe it's also because they care about the markets they serve and the neighbors who rely on them. Nobody sells more real estate than RE/MAX.
Hi guys, welcome back. The show you're watching is Your Money, Your Future, and just having a conversation that we're letting you sit in on today. I'm having a conversation with Andy Stoll. Andy's a social entrepreneur, and he has spent the last 4 years going out and living life, and what a great story. And Andy, I'll let you know that it's 5:25 here Central, and we're going to go. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So what I'd love for you to do is dive into the 5 reasons Americans could and should travel and 5 reasons they don't. And thank you very much for being our guest. It's been awesome having you. So I wish we could just sit here and talk for hours. I love your story. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can get There's a couple things I think are important. I set it up as it's what I call the paradox of American travel. So it again goes back to that question I asked at the beginning. What if you could do anything regardless of time or education or talent or money, what would you do? And the answer, if you ask most Americans, would say, half of them, 70% of them, maybe more, would say something related to travel. So that in essence could be what would be called your biggest dream. Now here's where the irony happens. We live in a country where, it's the paradox too, we live in a country where we're taught from the day we're born that you got to follow your dreams, do your dreams. If you believe, you can achieve. And we do that. But we only do that if your dream is starting a business, having a family, buying a house, getting a big TV. building something. But the thing we defer are those dreams about travel. We think for some reason those are the ones we're just going to defer. So there's a weird paradox because we live in a country that, which makes our country beautiful, is that we're just told, and the culture says you should go after your dreams. But if it's a dream about travel, a lot of us defer that. And we think, well, we'll do that one later. So that's the setup for what I call the paradox of American travel. And then I'll just really quick and you can maybe ask me some questions at the end there about the 5 reasons why we should be the most traveled people, because the realization traveling was that we're some of the least traveled, at least in the developing world or the developed world. And then the 5 reasons why we're not. So the 5 reasons why we should be, some of those are pretty easy. We are as a whole the richest country in the world. So it does take money to travel. I'm not stupid. I understand that. So we have a lot of money. We are in fact a money-rich, time-poor society. We have plenty of money, and with credit cards, we have even more than we need. The second one is we're one of the most educated populations in the country or in the world. So we know a lot about the world. We have the ability to sort of be entrepreneurial and figure out how we can go travel. So that's a good one. Number 3 is that we speak English. Everyone always asks me how many languages do I speak, and well, the truth is that I speak Mandarin and Cantonese, Chinese, as long as we're only talking about food. But otherwise, I can't really speak the language. And English is really the only thing I'm fluent in.
So I only speak pretty well, though,
I believe. Yeah, I've been working on it. There was a big warm up. I had books. I was doing little exercises before our get together here. But I only speak English. I believe that if you speak English, you can get around anywhere in the world. I'm not saying comfortably, but you can get around anywhere in the world. So that's a reason. If you lived in the Czech Republic and you only spoke Czech, it'd be hard to travel to a lot of places if you didn't speak English. The 4th reason is that we are really geographically centrally located in a lot of ways, that we can get pretty much anywhere in the world on just via one flight from the coast of the United States.
Right.
If you think about it, there's lots of amazing travel destinations where if you could be isolated in certain corners of the world, but we can go to Asia, we go to Europe, we go to South America. Australia is just one flight away. So there's another reason. And the last is that we are such a melting pot that there are people all over the place that someone from another country. I know someone. Everyone probably knows someone. And if you don't know someone, you know someone that knows someone. So there are connections around the world. People know America. You should be able to have a friend you can go visit wherever in the world. So those are the 5 reasons why you should be able to travel. Now, the 5 reasons why I think, and this is my theory, so these are debatable, and if anyone wants to tweet about this in a debate, we can have a Twitter debate about it.
Is that a Twitter bait?
The Twitter debate or something. I don't know. Anyway, the 5 reasons are 1, and this is a big one, time. As I said earlier, we're a money-rich, time-poor society. It's a very interesting challenge. It was very interesting as a traveler, I'll put it this way, in that as I had money, I was going to go until I ran out of money, but I didn't know how long I was going to travel. So I was traveling in a different way. I had unlimited time, but not limited money. So it allowed me to really take the cheap, slow route over the fast, expensive route. But that's the opposite way most people in America travel. The other reason why I think that we don't travel, or we say we can't travel, we can't go after that dream, is, I don't speak another language. Well, we've talked about this already. Certainly it helps to speak a local language. But even if you don't, you can learn a little bit, even en route on the plane, to help you get around. And in a lot of places, you don't even need it to go see, the tourist attractions and to just get around and enjoy the country. The third reason, and this is a big one, is there's fear. Fear is a huge thing. And I think that, unfortunately, I work in the media industry, but unfortunately, the media presents this idea that it's really dangerous out there. I ran around the world for 4 years, public transportation as cheap as possible, and nothing bad happened to me. I didn't even get pickpocketed. You got to use street smarts, you got to use common sense, but if you're smart about it, you're not going to walk out the door and get killed. I'm sure it's equally as dangerous to travel in Washington, D.C. as it is in Paris, as it is in Shanghai. It's not any more dangerous out in the world there. 4, and then there's a whole discussion there about the culture of fear in America, but I don't want to get into that. 4 is, I hear this from people, there's so much to do here. Anyone who travels knows that that's true. There's a lot to do here, but there's so much else that it's different and interesting out in the world. So we got that. And the last one, and this is a big one, and this really relates, I think, to the listeners on your show, but kind of what they're trying to figure out, especially in a financial planning world, is that we have this quest for success. And a lot in America, it's defined by what we do or what we build, and this keeping up with the Joneses idea, and this belief that if I go away for a year, 4 years, or 3 months, I'm going to miss out. I'm going to fall behind. I'm going to be out of the race. And that's a psychological thing that's stopping you. There is no reason that you cannot get away for a couple months or even a couple years that is going to, I think, substantially damage your life, unless your whole focus is to keep up with the Joneses and to be atop the mountain.
If your goal is the acquisition of stuff, then yeah, you're probably going to be behind a little bit, but maybe not.
Can I wrap up with this idea?
Absolutely.
I think this is maybe the most important thing, and then you can ask me some questions. You talked a lot about the word about experiences. I came back from my trip around the world. I essentially own nothing. I have very few things. I didn't buy a lot of things traveling. I bought some art, but that's about it. Mm-hmm. But I got a lot up here, and what that is experiences. How I think this relates to people in general, even if you have no interest in traveling. One of the best ways I heard it put is about the importance of experiences. There's a guy named Joseph Campbell, if you've heard of him, and he's a mythologist. He studied all the myths in the world. And he found this universal story that's in all these myths, and people think he has insight to life because he has this story. It's called The Hero with 1,000 Faces is the story. The book is called A Hero's Journey. But anyway, Bill Moyer asked him at the end of his life, you have all this insight into all these cultures. What's the meaning of life? That's what Bill Moyer asked Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell said, and I don't remember exactly because I heard this on the radio, but it was something into the idea that you experience the feeling of being alive. It's like the goal is to go have that experience, the where you feel that the air rushes in and your lungs fill up and you feel alive, and you know those moments and you've had them in your life.
Absolutely.
But if you notice, he said the meaning of life is about these experiences. But you know what? In the end of the day, travel gives you those experiences. That's why people like it. What I found in traveling, and this is sort of an interesting thing, is people go out and they go to travel. What they really want are experiences. They want to go out and meet the locals. They want to go out and do something that, I saw the Taj Mahal is cool, but I went out and had lunch with an Indian family and their house is way more cool. But what I found is people who go out into travel, particularly in the American sense, we go out and we think we have to buy that experience. So we spend a lot of money and we go to these places. But at the end of the day, it's the money that actually sort of shelters you from those experiences. If you're staying at the Hilton, you're not going to meet the locals who are going to invite you in their house. You're going to meet the locals that work at the Hilton. If you spend your money on the $1 million or the $1,000, boat ride around the bay in Thailand, you're not going to meet the local fisherman who's going to say, hey, why don't you come and meet my family? So actually, it's this weird thing that we have backwards, and I'm guilty of it too, is that we think money's going to buy us these experiences, when in fact, money is the biggest problem and the biggest barrier to having these experiences. And I spent 4 years going out and having such experiences, and I can't recommend it. Even if you don't go for 4 years, go for 4 months, go for 4 weeks, whatever it is, but go out and do what it is that you really want to do. And if that involves travel, I assure you that it's easier, safer, cheaper, and more friendly out in the world. And if I can do it, then anyone can.
So Andy, I don't know if you know this the other day. Well, you probably know because it was on your cell phone. We talked for 39 minutes the other day, and I feel like we could talk for hours. And we can't because we're running up against a break here. Now we're time starved right now. But what I'd like to do is have you just for 30 seconds. If people want to get a hold of you, if they want to check out some of the films that you've made, if they want to drink in some more of your experiences, how do they go about doing that?
Okay, I've got well, you talked about my website, but maybe the better way to do is I have a travel log called No Boundaries. And it's just No Boundaries, like NOBOUNDARIES, noboundaries.org. And it's a website where I've set up, and it's a lot of stories right now. And hopefully over the course of the next couple months and the next time, coming up, will be more about how to do what I did. I'm telling you, it's not rocket science. There isn't anything special. It's you'll find that I'm a pretty normal guy. That's the best way to go there first. There's a great FAQ section on kind of the basic questions. People always ask me, did I get killed? How much did it cost?
You're doing really well for being
most dangerous thing that happened.
Yeah, you look really good if you've been killed.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did not. I died once, but I got better.
Hey, Andy,
so there's that opportunity.
I've got to cut you off. No Boundaries, Andy Stoll, and I'll tell you what. And I'm gonna plug you just real quickly. There's some really really amazing visual presentations at andystoll.net. Guys, hop on, and if this is your passion, Andy's got great stories, and he can, by just watching him, following him on Twitter, and looking at his blog and his websites, give you tons of insight.
Let me just finish with.
Yep, go ahead.
Let me finish with this, Jeff. there's just a lot of people out in the world doing this. I'm not the only one. You can follow me on Twitter and look who I'm following, and you'll find 100, 1,000 other people doing this exact same thing. I'm not special. Go look at their stories, look at other people's stories, and just you go after what you want.
Last thing, thank you very much for being here. Would you consider coming back and sharing more stories with us?
Absolutely, anytime, Jeff.
All right, sounds great, Andy. We appreciate you. And we never did get the file, but Max hasn't gotten it yet. But once we do get it, we'll post it on our website as well.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Guys, the show you've been watching is Your Money, Your Future. We are over time, and I apologize. And Max, I'm sorry. We will see you guys next week. If you want to give me a call at my office, you've got financial stuff you want to chat about or want a way to get a hold of Andy, call me at my office. It's 515-245-3843, or catch me on the web at www.hjnadvisors.com. We'll see you guys next week.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios. Listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast One Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders. Building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.